Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Film Club podcast, where every month we deep dive into a different aspect of cinema, directors, actors, genres, or franchises. It doesn't matter, because it's always fun at the Film Club. I'm Dean.
I'm Boo.
And this month we're talking about foreign films, and this week we're talking about
The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari.
1920, directed by Robert Vine. It is the first horror film, the first great horror film. It's a Nick Cage favorite, and it's 103 years old, and it's pretty good. It's pretty decent.
Yeah, and this month is entirely curated by Dean. So, Lord save us all.
Yes, my attempt at doing a foreign films 101 in the broadest sense of the word. I figured we should start with something that's pretty old, pretty foundational, and pretty German, and I couldn't think of anything other than Cabinet of Dr. Caligari that fit all of those.
Or Das Cabinet des Dr. Caligari.
Ah, yes, Fräulein, yeah. I don't know what those words mean, but we'll take it.
The?
No, the words that I said.
Oh, I was going to say the and of are the only words that I don't think you knew.
I don't know. But yeah, so I've seen Cabinet of Dr. Caligari probably, I don't know, a half dozen times from film school stuff.
Or just because.
You know. But is this the first time you've seen it?
This is my first time watching it in its entirety.
Okay, so you've seen clips, right?
I've seen clips, but didn't know that the guy in it is named Cesare. I thought he was Caligari. I thought he was in the movie a lot longer than he actually is.
Yeah, because...
We don't get him a lot.
Yeah, he's played by Conrad Veidt, I think.
I believe so.
Second time on our podcast.
Yes.
Because he's in...
Casablanca.
Yeah. And it is funny because that he's like he's the iconic image, right?
Yeah.
He is, the tall, slender goth boy with the eyeliner, and he's in it for fucking 10 minutes? 15 maybe?
15 to be generous, yeah.
Yeah, because the movie's only like 80 minutes long, or 78 minutes long.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because his aesthetic is the movie's aesthetic.
Yes.
Very dark and expressionistic. Nothing looks real. It's
I mean, one of the first scenes, I'm like, oh my god, this is Corpse Bride. I mean, the dude looked like Victor Van Dort. It looked like his room, and I'm like, oh my god. This is Tim Burton. Tim Burton has been, training me for this moment.
I literally saw a review of this movie that was if Tim Burton directed The Penguin and Edward Scissorhands in a horror movie, and that is a very accurate assessment of Cabinet of Dr. Caligari, because this is like foundational for the horror genre for a bunch of filmmakers. I mean, Tim Burton is cribbing so much from this movie.
I'm going to go have a Tim Burton marathon when I get home tonight.
Of course you are. But we should probably let people know what the movie's about if you haven't seen this movie or don't know anything about a 103-year-old film. Are we safe to spoil this? I mean,
I feel like maybe if it was 110, we could spoil it, but I guess we could, break the rules at 103.
Okay. Because the movie generally is about Francis recalling the experience that drove his fiancée Jane to madness when the evil hypnotist Dr. Caligari and his somnambulous slave Cesare comes to their village. With the arrival of Caligari and Cesare came death. 2 murders were committed that drove the villagers into hysteria, and an attempt on Jane's life that nearly broke Francis, but it leads to the discovery of Caligari's true identity and his capture at the asylum. But when we see that Francis is recalling this at said asylum, and the dark surreal world around him, we begin to ask the question if anything he has told us is real or just the story of a madman. Done.
Yeah.
Done. But yeah, like the plot of this is tropey as hell, right?
Of course.
But it is
the beginning. This is the dawn of cinema and the dawn of horror.
Yeah. It is. I've read that a lot of film scholars, critics, things like that. Roger Ebert specifically said this is like the first true horror film, and I'm wondering how accurate that is, because there were like little macabre short films.
Mhm.
Like Thomas Edison did an adaptation of Frankenstein
He
before
did.
this. But in your opinion, how foundational do you feel this is?
I mean, yeah, it's up there, and I could see why there's the argument between this and Nosferatu being, the first horror film.
I mean, Nosferatu is 2 years after this.
Yeah, but I mean, we're dealing with Count Orlok, he's a vampire, and in this movie, we're dealing with Caesar and the macabre. So it's like I can kind of see why there's, confliction there.
Like, which one is the more impactful work on the genre?
Yeah, but I could totally see this being the first one, and then 2 years later, we're progressing in filmmaking and storytelling. So yeah, I could see this one being the first.
Okay, because I mean, I think that's just going to be the repeating thing about this movie, which is why people should probably watch this, is that it is such a ground level like work in so many different genres, because it is German expressionist. It is like the first true German expressionist film, with how it's designed, like the painted on shadows, the stark black and white, the very weird structure and design of everything in the movie. Did you enjoy the tall chairs and the short desks?
I'm glad you mentioned that. I mean, I decided to take no notes for this episode. I wanted to go in completely blind and just go based off of my feelings. And what the hell was going on with the policemen and those incredibly tall stools and that incredibly low ceiling? It made no sense.
It's so
ridiculous.
Weird. Yes, because...
And they get down every time. It's not like they stay up there working. Every time someone comes into the police station, I'm assuming that's what it is, you see them awkwardly getting down for their high stools. I'm like, what is this? What does it mean?
That is a question. What the fuck does this mean? Because the world is so warped that is it leaning into the fact that our narrator's unreliable and it's all like madness?
Or hear me out.
Okay.
Maybe someone on set, maybe set designer messed up and just got really small stools. And they're like, well, we got the stools, so I think we're just going to have to do with it.
Maybe. I mean, the sets in this were actually like relatively cheap. I think all sets cost like $300 and the actors paid like $30. I mean, 1920s money, but
Yeah. I mean, $30 is a lot in 1920.
Yeah.
But yeah, one of my favorite sets is the one with the mountain, and you see the people coming up and down the walkway leading down to the mountain.
Yes. Everything looks like a weird storybook. It looks like the storybook of somebody who like was really into like Edward Scissorhands and My Chem in high school, and they're like, we're just rolling it. Exactly. This is if you drew a storybook.
This is if I had talent.
Oh, please. But I'm curious because this is your first time seeing the movie.
Yeah.
What, I guess, vibe did you get out of it? Is there anything about it that really just stood out to you from the jump? Like, what did you expect going in?
I mean, again, I expected the movie was all about Caesar, thought he was Caligari himself, so I was kind of thrown with like, oh, this is not the story. He actually has a handler. How is this happening? It was just very weird, because Caesar's mostly in a box when he's not out doing, the bidding for Caligari himself. So I really didn't know what to expect once we got in there. But I was just like, Tim Burton. That's Tim Burton. Maybe that's another movie.
Literally, you're watching this and you're like, this just looks like all these other things that came out after it.
Yeah, and it's like I could totally see like because I mean Universal Monsters would be coming like in the next decade,
or it'd be more than a decade after this, because Dracula was 31. Yeah, so it'd be 11 years after this.
So it's like you could see the inspirations for those movies coming, and I was like, okay, it's really cool to see where it basically started.
Yeah, I mean, James Whale called this a influence on his filmmaking. Same, Tim Burton, he's name dropped this a few times, and a lot of the noir guys of like the 1940s or the like late 30s and the 40s, they were all inspired by German expressionism, and this is a very exaggerated German expressionist work, but Fritz Lang kind of takes this and is like, let's tone this down a little bit and we'll use some of this stuff in like M or Metropolis, where it's not as they're not painting shadows on the walls, but shadows are all over the work.
Yeah. And I mean, this is really kind of like, the forefathers of, of filmmaking, where it's like, yeah, we can see it even to today, how this movie, inspired people and is kind of a staple in how we do things with filmmaking.
Yeah, because there's so many things about this movie, just like even structurally, it does. Because it has like, I don't know if it's the first twist ending, but it's a fucking early one. It has the twist ending. It has this whole framing story going on.
It's got the lady in white. Because we always have to have a lady in white that wanders. It's like it's the first like psychological thriller. Like this is almost like the same basic gist as Shutter Island. Yeah.
That Martin Scorsese directed. It's really weird how watching this, I mean, I like the movie. I think it's a really good movie, but it is interesting that all the tropes in this have been repeated and done, better because, time and influence and all these other things. But it's so weird seeing like the first guy tell the joke,
Yeah. And that's how I felt with this movie. It kind of brought me back to last month when we were talking about Chaplin, and we see his progression, watching shorts and creating his own and then creating movies. And it's like, I can imagine the audiences in 1920 going to the Nickelodeon and, okay, I'm used to seeing these little 5-minute shows, now going to basically a feature, because it's 50 minutes.
Yeah, or it's 78.
So, we have that, and it's just kind of this shift from, funny kind of campy things to a horror movie, a psychological movie, where it's just kind of like, what's going on here? And I'm engaged.
Yeah, because I can't imagine anyone watching this that wouldn't be just at least interested to see what the fuck it looks like. Because, like, you can say, like, the story is, like, super tropey because it's the originator, all this stuff. Yeah. But, like, visually, it's very weird and wild. It feels like this nightmare dreamscape. Mm-hmm. And, that kind of goes in with the whole, twist ending and all that stuff.
Yeah.
In your opinion, did anything we see actually happen? Is anything in the Caligari story real? Is it all unreliable narration of a madman? How much of Francis's stuff do you think is true?
Well, I think it's one of those movies where, it's up to the viewer to decide what they believe it is. So something that, tends to irk me sometimes because we don't get an actual,
The reason you hate David Lynch?
I don't hate him. Oh. Wait till we get to David Lynch, man.
It's going to be good.
It's going to be epic. But I don't hate him. But it's just, in some movies it bothers me. This one it doesn't, because maybe it is the beginning, but they did it so well that you really feel like, at least for me, wait, was that real? Is this just, what's our lead's name in this movie?
Francis.
Like, is Francis just, having a trip right now?
Yeah.
And that's why I kind of liked it, where it's just, no, maybe he is disturbed and he's just kind of created this whole story in his head. Or, no, maybe it did happen and Caligari is just that strong that he broke him and he has him in his mental facility now.
I mean, it gives me the vibe of A Wizard of Oz, because, once we're finally at the twist and we see the ending, mm-hmm. and it's like, oh, Caligari was the head psychiatrist, and Cesare was one of the wandering patients, and mm-hmm. the fiance was just this wandering woman in white. And it's almost like the thing where, like in The Wizard of Oz, when she wakes up, he's like, and you were there, and you were there, mm-hmm. and you were there. And it gets this really interesting feel of how your brain does like dreams and things like that. Yeah. Or like how you tell, like if you're reading a novel, like you start casting the characters in your head as like, mm-hmm. Just so you have a face to the character. It's like, okay, yeah, this book, okay, this is now this person in my head.
Yeah.
I really like it because it feels like a dream. Or it feels like a nightmare, actually, but But it kind of is a reflection of Germany's trauma after like World War I. This is them realizing their kind of nightmare. Mm-hmm. because the writers Karl Mayer and Hans Janowitz, they were affected like pretty heavily by World War One. One of them was like an officer, and the other one pretty much faked madness so he wouldn't have to go die in the front. And I mean, you can read in the influence into that, where Caligari is kind of this German government and Cesare is the mindless soldier that has to do his bidding.
Yeah.
And I'm curious your thought on the Weimar Germany and post World War One Europe. Thoughts?
Yikes.
just big yikes.
Just big yikes.
I mean, but there's definitely that's in there, right? Like this.
Oh yeah.
This feels like Germany is like, guys, we just went through some shit right now.
Yeah, and I could totally see, Francis, being a soldier and out there in war, and it's just hell. Mm-hmm. He loses his best friend, his girl kind of goes nuts, and it's just this warscape that he's kind of wading through and trying to wake people up, hey, something bad here is happening. I need you to see it. It's not just me. I'm not crazy.
Oh, that's interesting. As like Francis is one of these guys who's been so traumatized by the war that he's like, guys, like nothing's normal anymore. Like everything's
changed.
Yeah, he's seen behind the veil of humanity, and he's like, it's all dark. It's all bad.
Yeah.
That's an interesting read. I didn't think about that. I latched onto Caligari as the general and Caesar as the soldier, but that's an interesting reading. I like that.
I do what I can.
So, now you expand on it. Now we write the term paper for it.
We're not writing no term paper.
I'm out of film school now. I don't need to go back.
We don't have to go back.
But I think it's a thing that's very interesting about this movie, because I know a lot of people look at this and say this is filmmakers and artists saying, guys, we're predicting Hitler like 20 years beforehand. And I'm like, that's a very weird one.
Yeah, that's a bit of a reach. I mean, I could see, where someone might tie that in, because Caligari is a dictator. He completely controls Caesar's life. He's got, basically everyone under control at the
fair.
At the fair, yeah, but also at the medical facility.
Yeah.
Because you see the doctors helping out Francis, but in the end, they're helping Caligari.
And you're questioning, it's like, well, how is he two-faced? Like, how are we supposed to interpret who this character is?
Yeah.
And it is interesting, because I get the sense that I'll just say the reading that much smarter people have taken from this movie is Germany post World War One. They were the artists were like, guys, we can't get into this. We can't let any charismatic leaders take control and try and rile us up into a new war. And then literally that happened. And a lot of people are like, oh, this is like a predictor of that. And I don't think that's all true. I feel it's more like
it's just a coincidence.
I feel it's a lot more of a reflection on, guys, we just went through, one of the most pointless wars in world history. Maybe we should like take a real deep look at how we got here, and
then you have decades later where one of the most horrific wars would occur, and yeah, I think it's just a coincidental thing, kind of like the Fast and the Furious.
Fast and the Furious, Hitler, one and the same.
No. I was gonna say the Final Destination movies, where now we're afraid to be behind trucks that are carrying lumber. It's kind of that thing where it's just like, had I never seen that movie, I probably wouldn't have thought of it. But now that I have, that's all I think about, and I will not drive behind one of those trucks. So it's just one of those coincidental things.
One of those things where, because some smart guy pointed it out 20 years later, then they're like, oh yes, I do see that. But really you're like, bro, what the fuck are you talking about? Put the bong down for a minute.
I mean, and that's also art. It's subjective.
Yeah.
So it's like, we can view it one way, someone else might view it another. I mean, it's interpretation.
I mean, an interesting thing about interpreting the movie is, how would you describe the movie? Because when this movie came out, horror as a film genre did not exist. No. So,
I mean, that's weird to be in a world where there's no horror. I mean, we love the horror genre.
Mm.
But
Because like even Frankenstein was considered like a science fiction book,
fiction,
and
yeah.
retroactively was declared, no, this is a film of the macabre. It is a horror book,
Mhm.
and it's interesting because even in film they were like, there's works of the macabre and dark stuff, but horror as a genre didn't really get solidified until a few years later, I think.
Yeah.
Until people started being like, this is what a horror movie is, like we've defined the tropes enough. So
It's like, we have our movie monsters, we love them, let's create this horror genre
that we can put them in the box, right?
Yeah, and it's like, no, this has been starting since Caligari, and there's probably, the macabre shorts that you could probably include those too, but I feel like this was really the jumping off point to getting us where we are today.
Yeah, but I guess the question here is, because this is like proto horror, how does this feel? Does it feel like a horror film? Does it feel like a drama? Does it feel like an art film? Does it feel more like a even like a psychological drama?
Yes.
Yes,
All of those. I mean, it feels kind of like it feels art house, but again, I don't think art house was, a term till much recent in our history.
Yeah, you're waiting for Bergman in the 50s.
Yeah, so, back then it probably would have been a drama. I don't know if, psychological was in there in the canon of, naming types of film.
Yeah.
But I mean, yeah, psychological is probably the best way to go with it because it does trip you up. You get to that twist in the end and you're like, wait, did this happen?
And it's a thing where the movie's also not very, it's not scary.
No.
In that sense, like I watched Nosferatu not too long ago, and I wouldn't call that movie frightening, but it is uncomfortable for the entire runtime.
Yeah.
It's kind of like the same thing like you watch The Shining, and like The Shining's not like, oh, I'm terrified.
No.
It is, I feel so uncomfortable watching this. Like there is something deeply wrong going on, and I don't know what it is, and I am just so uncomfortable.
And I can imagine for audiences in 1920, this was probably uncomfortable for them.
Mm-hmm.
You have this man in the box. He comes out. He does whatever Caligari tells him, and it's why? Why is he doing this? Oh no, he's going to let him out again. What is he going to do next? And, for us, decades and decades later.
Literally a century.
Centuries and centuries later.
Just 1 century, but okay.
I don't know. I'm feeling pretty old these days. Couple of centuries. But,
Turns out Boo's a vampire.
Shh, you can't tell anybody. No, but, yeah, for us, it's not scary, but I can imagine for audiences way back then, this was probably unnerving, unsettling, and then we'd get to Nosferatu where it's really unsettling.
Yes, and I guess that's the thing, because what, I'm a very like analytical person when I watch movies. I'm thinking about them a lot.
Oh, I know.
Yes, but you're a very, you feel the movies a lot more.
Mm-hmm.
Did this feel like uncomfortable? Did this feel scary?
No, because this is very Tim Burton, so this was very comfortable for me.
You're like, this is like going home. This is like
I
a
was
warm
waiting
bath.
for Jack Skellington to turn a corner in there and start singing. I was like, okay, let's do this.
I mean, it is one of those things where watching this, it's almost impossible to disconnect this from the people that have been inspired, especially Tim Burton, because it looks so much like Edward Scissorhands. It looks so much like, or
Nightmare?
It has like Nightmare. It has such the same vibe as like a big real what is it, Big Fish is like that nice happy version of this where he tells the tall tales in the weird surreal world. That's like the nice version of Caligari. It is so hard to disconnect this movie from everything that's come after it and talk about it as its own piece.
That's why, I was saying, to be in the audience when it came out, that's the true testament of, how you would feel. Because for us, we watch so many movies that it's like, we're able to pick up on those, inspirations from modern directors and filmmakers. But yeah, it would have been cool to see, people being afraid of this way back when.
I mean, I know that when it came out, because I did my due diligence, I read my IMDb trivia.
Of course.
Where when it came out, people were like not down with this movie. They thought it was like disturbing
Mhm.
trash. They were like, what is this? I don't like this. I want my money back.
Sounds like a horror movie to me.
Boo was like, this was the first Texas Chainsaw Massacre. They've come full circle.
Or it's the first cult film.
I would definitely call this the first cult film.
A midnight movie.
This feels like, yeah, because I know that this played in like some Paris movie theater for like a decade.
7 years.
7 years. That's definitely a cult film kind of vibe.
Yeah.
They're like, hey guys, we got Count Dr. Caligari and we got 15 movies. This is gonna play midnight every weekend, boys. Let's go.
And there'll be somebody in those seats every weekend.
Oh yeah. But overall, I would say we both liked the movie.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it.
So, is there anything that you didn't enjoy about the movie? Because let's be honest, it's 100 years old. There's probably some things that have not aged well about the film.
Yeah, I mean the fiance or the soon-to-be fiance, she was kind of annoying. How she just kind of was like this ghostly figure that just kind of kept floating around.
She's almost plot irrelevant.
Yeah,
honestly.
Yeah, because it's a thing where we find out that she is in between these two best friends, and it's kind of like hey man, if she picks you, I swear I'll be cool with it. And then the dude gets got. And then she just kind of goes mad. But we don't really get too much of her before that. So it's kind of like...
Has she always just been kind of weird? And then there's the whole thing where Caligari sends Cesare to kill her. And then Caesar's like, oh, I can't because she's hot. And then tries to kidnap her for some... That's never really explored.
No. And then we have, the fake Cesare in the box. And I'm like... Where did he get a fake Cesare? But I'm like, okay, whatever.
Does he carry that with him everywhere? Does Cesare sleep in the box with a fake Cesare?
No, he's probably under the bed.
For
storage. Because you already have Cesare in the cabinet, and that's taking up a lot of space.
And that is a big cabinet.
And it's a little house that he's living in, so you gotta be space conscious.
Caligari's minimalist, all right? He knows how to keep his life in order.
There was no IKEA back in this day, so he couldn't just be like, you know what? I need a new set of cabinets. I need, more space.
God, I want there to be a scene where Dr. Caligari is looking at cabinets, and he's like, will this fit my somnambulist?
He had a tiny home before tiny homes was a thing.
Dr. Caligari, influential in more ways than film.
Who knew?
But, yeah.
There wasn't a lot that, I disliked. I watched this on Tubi. I don't know how you watched it, if you watched it on YouTube, like you were recommending.
I watched it on YouTube because it's public domain as hell. Like, it's you can watch this on YouTube, and you can watch this anywhere for free. It is not hard to find.
Yeah, so I don't know if it was just the copy that Tubi has, or it's just... This is a movie that's over 100 years old. The quality kept switching, and you could tell where this was spliced together with a more,
a cleaner print versus a rougher print.
A cleaner print, and then it would transfer back to the way that it had looked. So there were times where it kind of looked a little bit on the purplish side, and then it would switch back to, black and white. So it was just this thing where, it was more the quality of the print that I watched. And then because, it's an older movie and they would show like the handwritten, things for you to read. Yeah, I couldn't read it. It was just so kind of like...
Well, it's also, sometimes it's in just straight fucking German and they just expect you to roll with it.
I mean, whether it was in German or it was just, it's a 100-year-old movie. So these things kind of start to fade off the screen. So it's like you're trying to focus and like, what is he writing? What is this? And it's like, oh, okay, just screw it. I'm just going to piece it together.
I mean, that is something that I think people should be conscious about if you're watching silent movies, is prints start to matter. Like, the version you watch matters a lot because, like, the soundtrack or, like, the score is different amongst, like, almost all of these because there was no sync sound, so they just kind of, like, sent sheet music out. But the other thing is, like, the movie does have this thing where sometimes the tinting, that color tinting where it's like blue to represent night or sepia or whatever, the consistency for that, there is none. Sometimes it's just blue for some reason, and then it's just not halfway through a scene, and then it comes back again. And that I'm not even thinking is a splicing issue. That's almost like somebody fucked up in the lab.
Yeah, because some of those scenes where, you know, it would transfer to purple or possibly blue. There was one where there was this woman and she had these incredibly dark circles around her eyes.
Mm.
And, you know, with the blue tinting, it reminded me of, I can't remember the movie. It's another, you know, one of these old movies where Jesus heals the lepers and they do the trick with the red and blue filters.
Oh, yeah.
Where, you know, it's the healing process and they switch over to the red filter.
So and then the makeup disappears.
The makeup disappears, but in the blue filter, you could see it and it's very exaggerated. And I was kind of like, if I can remember that movie by the end of this episode, I was wondering, you know, maybe this movie was an inspiration for that movie, for that trick.
I mean, that's a very interesting photography trick because that's used now. Well, I mean, it's hard because it has to be on film and with black and white. But I know for the lighthouse, they use that exact trick.
Oh, do they?
Yeah. They use that exact trick at the end of the movie to make blood and things disappear from Robert Pattinson's face.
Mm-hmm.
But that's one of those like weird like camera trick things that you can do in camera if you know how to like work film, which is cool.
And because, you know, this is the dawn of cinema, you know, all these things are being learned. That's why it's like it's so fun to see that all these little things that we see, you know, in modern day movies was being invented and created in these movies.
Oh yeah. I mean that's kind of like the thing about this movie where you're like, man, the pacing's kind of weird, but fuck, we've had feature films for like 5 years at this point. I gotta give it a break, right?
Yeah.
Because, I mean, that's probably my biggest critique of the movie is it's 78 minutes when it could be an hour, you know, or 70 minutes. Like it's 6 acts, right?
Yeah.
That's what it says. You know, Cabinet of Dr. Caligari, a story of the macabre in 6 acts. Bro, it could be 5. Like, come on now.
Or give us more Caesar.
Yeah, honestly, because the whole thing with like Caesar and Caligari are so much more interesting than
Francis trying to run around and tell people, hey, this is happening, believe me.
Exactly. Or the whole thing where Jane's looking for her father and that's just not interesting at all. Like I think I tuned out every time Jane started like having her B plot. And I feel kind of bad, but it's like it is so plot irrelevant to the thing that's interesting about the movie because you don't really because I don't really understand, is Caesar magic or is he like, what is Caesar? Because in the, you know, they're like, here we have Caesar the somnambulist. He is 23 years old and has slept for 23 years, never awaking once. And now I will show you Caesar's eyes opening and he'll be under my spell. And I'm like, what the fuck is he?
A sleepy boy.
A very sleepy boy. Very sleepy.
Sleep for 23 years, my God.
But it was like, my human ideal is Cesar. He's emo. He likes naps.
Yeah, you just need to be emo. You would enjoy a 23-year nap. You'd wake up and be like, 10 more minutes. 10, just please.
Just please.
If you really love me, 15.
But that's the thing, like, what is he? Because it's all fantastical, but what is he?
You know, in pop culture, we know Caesar the way that he is, and, you know, the dark clothes and, you know, the makeup under his eyes. And then we see him at the very end, and he's, you know, very much in the corner, kind of like a peacock, you know, just standing there, and it's just like, that's not the Caesar we knew. You're like, what is this? It feels like you're still, because it's a sideshow event, right?
Yeah.
So it's like...
Also, I almost forgot. We should point out that we're calling him Caesar. I think technically his name is Cesare, but that we're calling him Caesar.
I thought I read it as Caesar.
Well, it's written as Caesar, but I'm pretty sure it's supposed to be pronounced Cesare.
Oh, yeah, I see that.
But
we'll just call him Caesar.
We're calling him Caesar because like we're Americans, god damn it. But continue.
Oh yeah.
At the sideshow.
Yeah, so you know we come into the sideshow and that's where, you know, we meet Caesar and Caligari for the first time.
We see their act great.
And you know, now we get him at the end and it's like, are we still in the sideshow? Have they duped us, all of us?
Look, if we're talking about being duped at a sideshow, having your act be this guy who I swear to God has slept for 23 years is going to wake up and that's my act. That is a horrible act.
And then, can you tell me how long I'm going to live for? You're not making it till dawn. He got God.
I guess that's also the thing. Because Caesar predicts the future. And and that's like the gimmick. He's like, he will wake up and tell you your fortune. And he is 100% accurate. I'm like,
I mean,
bruh.
you may as well have picked up something in 23 years of sleeping. If you're going to wake up after 23 years of sleeping, you better entertain me.
Right? You've been saving yourself for this moment. Come on, you got to pay off here.
You better tell me you know what the cosmos are, something cool. Do a backflip.
But I think that it is like that is the most scammy, dumb fucking like stage act I can think of. Because it's like, oh yeah, my fucking assistant here's gonna wake up and lie to you, and then he'll go back to fucking sleep. God,
Genius, brilliant.
I wish my job was that easy. Oh Lord. But and I think it's a thing, and then it's like, why does Caligari want to commit the murders? I mean, I understand like he's doing it because he wants the power. He wants to prove that he can control somebody else like fully and completely. But does he just kill Francis's friend just to prove Caesar wasn't bullshitting him?
He's like, oh, well, I told them that he can predict the future, and now I gotta off this kid. All right, hold on, come back.
I mean, it is one of those things where you could take this as almost an unintentional comedy if you try and analyze this as like trying to be even a semblance of realism.
Yeah, I mean, like when they go through Caligari's office looking for his books, and the one doctor's, wait, he's got the good books behind the cool skeleton in the corner.
The fact that he's like, give me a second, and opens the secret thing, the secret wall safe, and I'm like, what the fuck? And then he has the books, right? And he's opening them up, and it's like, the diary of Dr. Caligari. And he opens it up, and he's like,
it's like young Frankenstein.
How I did it. It's literally how I did it. It is literally that. And then there's the whole thing where it's like Caligari and Caesar, they were like Italian, and they were doing this thing, and that was like 100 years before this. So the psychiatrist is like, this guy had some good ideas. I'm gonna steal this, run it back, innovate. What?
I don't know.
Yeah.
But Caligari himself, did he remind you of anybody?
He did in one particular aspect, but I know it's wrong. So his gloves. Do you see his gloves?
Yeah.
Where they were like white and they had the 3 black stripes on them, like that looked like Mickey Mouse gloves. I was like,
you picked up Mickey Mouse.
I picked up Mickey Mouse from his gloves.
Okay.
Yeah.
We are, worlds apart, because once I saw Caligari, my brain went to Lon Chaney in London After Midnight.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
I was like, wow. I'm like, I wonder if this inspired Lon Chaney, just, costume-wise, not makeup-wise.
I mean, the hat, the cloak, the whole getup.
Even, the way that he moves. I was like, wow. I'm like, I wonder if this was an inspiration. But, yeah, we have Lon Chaney and then we have Mickey Mouse,
Same side, or 2 different sides of the same coin.
Exactly.
Obviously.
Art is, to be interpreted the way that the viewer sees it.
Have you ever heard that and you're just like, bro, you're just full of shit, man?
I am, because I can't believe you saw Mickey Mouse.
It was the gloves. I don't know why. I saw that and my brain was like, are those Mickey Mouse gloves? How many fingers does he have? I'm sorry. I don't know why. I don't know why.
I'm trying to think. I'm like, Disney just turned 100 this year, so...
God, could you imagine Walt Disney's like, you know what? This Caligari guy, I don't like what he's doing. But those hands, though, there's something there.
Well, the Disney company turned 100, so I'm assuming the Mickey Mouse shorts or the Steamboat Willie, those were around that time or a little bit afterwards?
I think they're about to go into public domain, so they're like 90-something. They might be 100 now. God.
Just, what a wild time.
Incredible.
Everything is brand new.
Cocaine was an over-the-counter medication.
It was in sodas.
It was. It's good shit. It's good shit.
What a time to be alive.
What a time to be alive. But The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari, it is a movie that I think is incredibly influential. It's
important.
It's incredibly important. I think that's the way I should put it. It's incredibly, incredibly important. It has its flaws. And then
But what movie doesn't?
exactly. But now we're getting to this last one. Is it entertaining? Could you pop this in for the girls, for the boys, and be like, "Hey guys, we're gonna watch Count of Dr. Caligari." Can you do the Nick Cage thing and bring people in to watch Count of Dr. Caligari?
No, I think it's, it's one of those movies where you have to know who your audience is.
Is it a homework movie? Is it like if you want to be like a completionist on the horror genre, you kind of have to watch it?
Yeah, I think it could be a horror. Blah, blah, blah. I think it could be a homework movie, but it's fun homework.
Mm.
There wasn't a point in this where I felt like, man, this is gonna be a rough watch. How am I gonna get through this? This was, this is fascinating. I can't wait to see what happens next.
Yes.
And I think,
yes.
that there's, special audiences that go with this, the horror fans. I think horror fans would love this. I think cinephiles would love this. Film bros, you have to know who you're presenting this to.
This isn't something you can be like, "Hey mom, you want to sit down and watch this?"
I mean, unless your mom likes horror movies or she's a cinephile, yeah.
It's one of those things where I enjoy this, but I can't. This is a difficult recommend, honestly, just because of quality issues, like physical qualities of the prints. Because it's hard to be like, "Oh, watch this on YouTube. It might look good," because there's a few rough ones out there.
I mean, look, and we were planning on doing Cinema Paradiso last month, and we had a hard time getting duplicate copies of it to watch. Well, also finding
the proper cut of the damn thing.
The proper cut, and then being able to recommend to you guys to go watch this and find it, because it's kind of hard to find the movie. So it's one of those things where, yeah, that is a factor into recommending this. But I don't think that should be too bad because it's public domain. So, yeah, you can recommend this to anybody, but I think it is very a niche film that you have to know who to recommend it to.
Yeah, and if you were going to watch it, it's because it is important. It's way more important than it is like entertaining. Like, I think that's like a qualifier we can put in. Is this the most important horror film ever made?
I don't think it's the most important, but it's high up on the list because it's the first.
Ooh. You don't think it's the most important? What do you think is the most important?
I feel all my bias coming out of me because there's a ton of horror movies that I love, so I don't think I can answer that.
You're about to say Halloween, and you're like, wait, no, Psycho. Wait, no, fucking
Dracula, Frankenstein. Abbott and Costello meet Frankenstein.
The Boo is having like a seizure right now, being like, I need to know which is the most important one.
My eye may or may not be twitching right now, so I'm not going to answer that question, but it's high up on the list. It's also really high up on the list for silent films.
Yeah.
That's something here at the Film Club that we are always going to push. Please give silent films an opportunity.
I mean, this is definitely in your silent film starter pack.
Absolutely.
Probably like this and Nosferatu. If you're going to watch a silent German film, this or Nosferatu is your pick.
Or both.
Yeah. Or
double feature.
Oh, God. That would be a pretty sick double feature, honestly. I might do that when I get home. But like, because Nosferatu and Count of Dr. Caligari, they're the same vein. Mm-hmm. They are primordial ooze of horror films that a lot of things kind of spawn out of.
Yeah.
They're these movies that influence goes well beyond them. They are movies that you can still actively watch today in a theater.
We have.
Yeah, we saw
Nosferatu
in the theater for its 99th anniversary. And it's one of those things where like The Count of Dr. Caligari is a very good movie that I really wish more people gave a shot to, because I know a lot of people are like, it's black and white, it's silent, it's probably boring. It's not boring. It's interesting.
Yeah.
It's not fucking Fast and the Furious, but it's fucking interesting.
It's family though.
It's family. Jesus Christ.
I had to.
But yeah, do you have anything else you want to talk about? The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari?
No, it's just I enjoyed it a lot more than I thought I would. I really recommend people watch it. Maybe watch it a couple of times. I felt like I needed, maybe another go at it before we, started recording. Because there was just so much there.
I mean, it's only 78 minutes long.
It is, but I also watched it very early this morning, so...
There's reasons.
Yeah, I kind of got wrecked there.
But yeah, so that's Count of Dr. Caligari. I really like the movie. It's solid across the board, incredibly important. I think it's visually interesting, like, throughout. The story's, like, kind of fucking ridiculous, and I think it might be, like, on purpose. But yeah, I think if you got time, give it a watch. It's you cannot go wrong watching the movie.
No, and it may open the door for, maybe German expressionism films, other silent films, other horror movies. I mean, there's just so many movies out there that need to be watched and need to be saved. Because can you imagine if someone was like, oh, this is kind of boring, let's not restore it or do anything. Like, no, got to keep it. It's important.
But what do we do? But what are we watching next week?
Next week, it's another Dean pick.
It is.
And it's a movie that I've never seen before. I have a feeling that this is going to be a trend this month.
It might be, because I watch a lot of foreign movies, and you generally don't.
Yeah. Every now and then I will. But next month, we're going to be talking about Grand Illusion.
Le Grand Illusion, directed by Jean Renoir. It is another movie about kind of this post-World War One.
More cabinets?
No, I mean, pretty nice cabinets.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, it is directed by Jean Renoir. It has been called the greatest movie ever made. It is a movie that's incredibly poignant. I'll leave everyone with this. They asked Orson Welles once if he could take 2 movies with him, on a desert island, or he can only save 2 movies and the rest of cinema would be destroyed. What would be the 2 movies? And he was like, well, out of the bulk of cinema? Well, The Grand Illusion, obviously, and something else. You pick one. It doesn't matter. So Orson Welles loved The Grand Illusion.
All right.
But if they wanted to listen to that, where can they go?
If you want to listen to us on a different platform than you currently are, you can find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube.
You can go to our YouTube channel, The Film Vault, where Dean eventually will get off his ass and upload more video versions of this podcast.
Woohoo!
Some great slideshows of all the fun movies we talk about. But if you wanted to know when that was going to happen, or know what we're up to, you can go to our social media at
The Film Club Podcast on Instagram, where we post daily stories, upcoming episodes, and random adventures we go on.
And with that,
we'll see you next week at the Film Club.
Have a good week, everybody.